Hi, this is Doug Gaylor with Crexendo, and we've got a couple of follow-up questions from the Grapevine Investor Network that I'd like to address for you. So the first question that came in was, in terms of competition, who worries you more, RingCentral or Microsoft? Um, Great question. Both strong competitors in the field, and both competitors in really a different kind of way, shape, and form. So RingCentral obviously is more of a direct head-to-head competitor. They have a very similar offering and have a very similar distribution strategy, selling through a direct formula and through a channel formula similar to Crexendo. And their platform is very similar to the Crexendo platform as far as features and functionality. They obviously have the largest share of the UCaaS market today, and so I would say that they are probably more serious of a competitor today than they've ever been. In the same respect, Microsoft is a competitor, but in a different fashion as well. So Microsoft Teams has been their UCaaS offering for some time now. Teams has been not overly well received from a UCaaS perspective. Teams obviously has a lot of value to folks that are heavily invested in the Microsoft infrastructure, but Teams has been really kind of limited as far as what the true functionality and capabilities of the UCaaS offering have been. So Microsoft has not been as strong of a player in the industry up to this point. Now, recently, Microsoft announced the acquisition of Metaswitch Technologies, and Metaswitch was a large provider of hosted platforms for the industry, and so they were the second largest platform provider behind BroadSoft. BroadSoft, as you may be aware, was acquired by Cisco about 2 years ago. Metaswitch just was recently acquired by Microsoft. I'm not sure that that transaction has been completed yet, but was announced about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So Microsoft is making a big move into the space to shore up their Teams offering and give a little bit more functionality and capability to their Teams offering. So Microsoft, as I mentioned earlier, hasn't been a huge direct competitor in the UCaaS market, but with the acquisition of Metaswitch, I would anticipate them becoming a more vulnerable or more vibrant competitor in the UCaaS space for us. But I would say today, if I looked at our competition, RingCentral would be the big gorilla out there in the industry for us. Second question that came in was, how often do you make hardware upgrades, and do you charge customers for these upgrades? So we don't do hardware upgrades nearly as much as we do software upgrades. Obviously, as a UCaaS company, Unified Communications as a service, the majority of our offerings are service related and software related. And so as we look at our software as a service model that we have out there, we come out with new software enhancements on our platform about every 6 to 8 weeks. We work on an agile software release process, which means that we're constantly working new sprints of software release on our platform with new and enhanced features and capabilities. And so about every 6 to 8 weeks, we're coming out with new software enhancements, and those enhancements are made available to our existing customers at no additional charge. From a hardware perspective, the hardware really does what the software tells it to do. So the only hardware components that Crexendo really works with is our actual telephone instruments that sit on the desktop. And that hardware is obviously something that is controlled by the software and the applications behind the scenes. So we don't do hardware upgrades very often at all. We've had a couple of revisions on our phones, similar to the mobile phone manufacturers, and that Apple or Samsung may come out with a new version every few years that has a new capability or a new widget. But our hardware upgrades have been very minimal, to say the least. So we come out with a new hardware option about every 3 or 4 years. And so those phones are made available to new customers and existing customers. But there is a charge for them to do an upgrade. If they're on our rental program, they do have options that they can easily move into the new phones at not a huge differential in cost from their existing telephones. But again, majority of the software upgrades are going to be what's going to be critical, and hardware not as critically important as a software as a service company. Okay, and our third and final question that we have you seen competitors disappear due to COVID-19? Obviously, COVID-19 has changed the world as we know it and changed, obviously, the business environment as we know it over the last 3 or 4 months as we've experienced this pandemic of unprecedented experiences here. And so we haven't seen any competitors literally disappear overnight. You would have had to been in pretty poor shape to have had the pandemic eliminated your company in a 3 or 4 month period. What we have seen is that we have seen a lot of demand for our products and offerings. So the UCaaS space is really getting a lot of attention right now because customers need to have more flexibility with remote users and collaboration and conferencing capabilities. And so I think we'll see at the end of the day, the silver lining from this pandemic is a greater demand for UCaaS type technologies. So I think that will have an overall positive effect business-wise once all of the dust settles from this pandemic. As far as competitors, we have seen some M&A discussions pick up due to the pandemic. So I think some of the smaller companies that may be in the categories of less than $10 million in revenue, and some of them obviously much smaller in the $1 or $2 or $3 million revenue stream, may have some challenges because again they're relying on a lot of small and mid-sized businesses for their organizations, and so as those companies may have trouble making their bills, these smaller UCaaS providers may have trouble or problems keeping the doors open. We haven't seen anybody go out of business, but we have seen some higher discussions and opportunities arising on the merger and acquisition front. And I think some of that's due to the fact that some of these smaller UCaaS companies may not have been in a great financial position, and the pandemic obviously didn't help them in their current situations. But as far as competitors disappearing, nothing that's been evident overnight. But I think that it'll have some shake-up in the industry as we try and recover from this unprecedented pandemic. That's it for the questions. So really appreciate all the attention and interest from the Grapevine Investor Network. And if there's any other questions, feel free to reach out, and glad to address them. Thanks.